welcome to Global Entrepreneurship Week, Story of the Entrepreneur, and I'm Anthony Chansmooth from Anth Consulting, and here we are today with Tom Dawkins from startsomegood.com. So welcome, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
So Tom, tell us about your entrepreneur story.
When I was 16, I went away for a year on exchange to the US, and while I was there I was selected to attend a conference called the State of the World Forum. Now it was kind of happenstance that gave me that opportunity. The conference was a kind of post-Cold War powwow as people tried to figure out what was the new framework within which we understood kind of geopolitics and what were the new objectives now that the kind of overarching singular objective of all foreign policy and geopolitical relations, the Cold War, had disappeared. And I think quite late in the piece they decided it'd be really fun, given that they were talking about the future, to get some young people along. But they didn't have the time or the money or the inclination to do this global search for young leaders. So they partnered with AFS Exchanges, the world's largest exchange organisation, to select only amongst young people who are already in the United States on the full year program, which I was. So had they done kind of a real search for like who was the most deserving young Australian, leader, entrepreneurial type, who deserved this opportunity, I mean, I never would have heard about it because I wasn't tapped into those networks. And those networks themselves were very fragmentary back then, before we had the internet really, at least in its current form. If I had heard about it, I definitely wouldn't have applied because it didn't sound like anything I deserved. And if I had applied, I wouldn't have been selected. But because there were only 61 of us there in the country, I was somehow selected to be the Australian youth representative at this event. And it was a completely extraordinary experience that changed my life. And it was just the experience of being told that my voice mattered, that my perspectives, however ill-formed as a 16-year-old, were still valid, and that I deserved to participate in the conversation. I barely ate, I barely slept, I ate. I lost 8 pounds that week and I had much less to lose. Then the only thing I can kind of compare it to experientially was falling head over heels in love. When you're not tired, you're not hungry, you never think about those things. And in a way, I think I was falling in love with the idea of myself as a change maker, with the idea of my own capacity to create change. But coming out of that event, I had kind of two contradictory feelings. On the one hand, I felt very empowered myself, very, kind of a level of confidence and assurance that I didn't have before because of just those intense experiences within that week. But I also came away feeling like this is a really woefully inadequate way to actually involve young people's perspectives in conversations that matter. That this is like horribly haphazard. Every one of us who was there came from affluent families who could afford to send kids to the United States for a year on exchange. We were chosen in this slightly unusual manner. And I just thought there's got to be better ways to actually involve young people's perspectives more systematically, more fairly, in the conversations that affect them. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since.
Thank you. So when did Start Some Good commence, and what's happening with it now, and what was your primary driver for that particular organisation?
I went to work for an organisation called Ashoka in Washington DC, and my job there was to think about how social technologies could support the creation of an everyone a changemaker world. And in particular, we focused on kind of essentially inspiration and the point at which people give themselves permission to be change makers. The first step of creating change is to give yourself permission to be a change maker, to take on the identity of a change maker. If you don't do that, you can't create change. You have to believe that you're capable of it, in other words. So we were really focusing around that piece, the inspiration piece, and that was at Ashoka was where I met my co-founder of Start Some Good, Alex Budak, and we saw the need to create a platform for that for the raising of initial early stage seed financial capital, because no matter how inspired people are, it's still very, very difficult to go from inspiration to action. In terms of when we started, the website launched in March last year, so about a year and a half in, and it's going good, but there's a long way further to go. We've got some really great case studies and track record now. We've delivered about $500,000 to 92 initiatives in 20 countries, which we're really proud of, but there's a long way to go in terms of building scaling up the platform, and part of that is improving the site itself.
What's your ongoing vision for Start Some Good?
So our vision is to create a world where anyone can be a change maker. So we're very much seeing ourselves as continuing to pursue kind of some of the mission and the work that we were doing at Ashoka where we first met. And we think that anyone a change maker world involves a slightly easier pathway to raising initial capital, and particularly involves communities able to identify the projects that they themselves want to happen in their communities. So we always talk about, rather than the old world was waiting for a big yes, a lot of what happens in the social sector is waiting for a big yes. You're waiting for a government grant, or you're waiting for a rich person to believe in you, or you're waiting for a bigger foundation to pick up your idea and run with it. And instead and that, in a way, thinking about the cultural industries, the creative industries, that's what the music industry used to be like as well. You need a big yes from a record label, and then with their help, you need a big yes from a radio station. And then and only then would the public hear your music and begin to rally around you. In a way, we're still in that spot with the social sector, and we want to push us through to where music is now, which is musicians forming direct relationships with fans, and through the accrued support of all those little yeses, one person by person by person saying, yes, I like this music, yes, I want to support you to make more of it. Musicians are empowered to kind of raise funds, go on tour, build a livelihood for themselves in a new way, and we're trying to create that sort of a pathway for social entrepreneurs, rather than turning to those established institutions who don't always understand what needs to happen in our communities. They can turn to that community itself.
Thank you. So what have been some of the biggest challenges in your experience so far, and what advice could you give to someone who's starting out?
I think the learning that all entrepreneurs discover is how much work it takes to make change happen. Starting a business and being an entrepreneur is hard. Being a social entrepreneur is actually harder again, because you've got to create a sustainability for yourself. Whether it's a non-for-profit or a for-profit, it doesn't really matter. You've got to build revenue streams in a way that can support yourself in the long term. But that's not enough. You've actually got to be creating a social impact. You could have a sustainable business model, but if it doesn't create social impact, you're no longer a social entrepreneur anyway. So you've got to do two very difficult things simultaneously. And it's kind of in an interesting space, I think. I think social entrepreneurs have to combine this level of naivety around, yeah, I can do this. Yeah. It's, no worries, I've got this. And then this stubborn perseverance when it actually turns out to be much harder than we anticipated.
Great. So what exactly is crowdfunding, or you like to call it peer funding? Could you explain that, and what pitfalls have some people faced in trying to raise capital that way?
Crowdfunding means to kind of aggregate multiple small contributions in order to raise the funds you require to do a certain piece of work. But when we use the phrase crowdfunding, we generally mean happening online and using a certain kind of technological context that which involves radical transparency in terms of goals, which involves risk with all or nothing components, and those things together turn it into a more game-like experience than traditional fundraising methods. It's a challenge that you have to succeed at before the time runs out, or you lose everything. Fundraising is an outcome of storytelling. You mentioned storytelling before, and that's really what fundraising is all about. It's not about the asking for money bit, it's about the telling a story piece. And the story has to be together we can do this, with your help, this can happen, that will lead to this, and that will then produce the change we want. So it's a story about a change that is made possible through their participation.
Based on your experience, what's happening right now in the social innovation space here in Australia, and how does that compare globally? What's one good thing that's happening, and what's one thing that we could probably improve on?
Nothing that rational. The social space, people are not just kind of objectively, rationally assessing where their money can make the greatest difference. It might be nice if they did. What people are generally doing is having emotional reactions to opportunities to contribute. For startups, you're asking yourself two questions. It's both, do I want this to happen, but it's also, do I believe it can? Do I believe this person can make it happen? You wouldn't give money if you didn't know who the entrepreneur behind it was, because the success of that project, because you know intuitively that no matter how good the idea is, just as is true in the business world, the ultimate success of that idea will be based on the qualities of that entrepreneur. That's kind of the premise of almost everything I ever do. It's the premise of Start Some Good, is the idea that we have everything we need. We just need to bring it together. We have all the resources we need, all the ideas we need. We just need to kind of put resourcing behind those ideas. And that's certainly true for Sydney and Australia in general.
Tom, thanks a lot for your knowledge and your experience. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you. How do people get in contact with you, or how do they find out about what you're doing?
Best way is to check out our website at www.startsomegood.com, or we're on Twitter at startsomegood, or I myself am very responsive and always happy to engage with people on Twitter. I'm at TomJD.
At Tom JD. Okay, cool. All right, so once again, startsomegood.com. Check it out. Awesome project. And for more on the GEW projects, just head to australianentrepreneurship.com. So we'll catch you next time.